a good friend of mine who was the prefect of Sodality at St. Patrick's in Rockville invited Father Murphy to come and speak to our Sodality, and he gave a talk. And I remember the whole time just thinking to myself that, he's speaking my language. I don't know, I just felt that whatever he said or whatever he didn't say, certain catchphrases or whatever, I really was attracted to what he had to say.
Yes. Well, at first I fell down the steps and broke my leg, and then my neighbor, Carolyn Naughton, came every day and brought our dinner. And my husband said, whenever she needs a favor, we are going to return this favor. So several months later, she came down and she asked me to go to Sodality meeting. As I listened to this priest talk, it wasn't that he was so impressive until he said, don't rely on the CCD program to educate your children in the faith. It's your responsibility. So I raised my hand and I said, well, what if you don't feel qualified? Well, it's your responsibility to take a Bible class or to learn more about your faith. So later, after he gave his talk, I went up and I said, well, where can you find this? Where can you find this Bible class or anything? Oh, he says, I'm teaching one over in your nearby parish. You're welcome to come.
And at the end of the 6 weeks, he invited several of us, I guess, to attend a retreat. And being a convert, I had never been on a retreat before, which I did, and I was incorporated on that retreat. And that was June 1st, 1975. So I've been in Regnum Christi for 41 years.
So they'd have this encounter with Christ. And so I really liked all the women. They're very welcoming. And I started to learn to read my Bible every day, which I never had done before. And as I'd sit there at my encounter, the wall facing me had mirrors on them that had half of them had fallen on the floor, and it was glue and everything on the wall. And I said to the lady afterwards, that's very distracting. Do you mind if I take the rest of those mirrors down and paint the wall? And she said, sure, go right ahead. And then Pat Warner came up and said, oh, I'll help you. I just painted my bedroom. So we met like a week later and cleaned the place up and painted it. And so we just shared the cost, 50-50, and we were just as happy as can be to make it a more suitable room for the teams to meet.
The brothers would go into the Catholic schools and talk to the kids about joining this group. And so there were 30 8th grade girls that came to my house, sat around on the floor in my family room. And that included Cecilia Rowedder and Denise Madgey. And that's how we all got started.
Brother came to our classroom, one of the Legionary brothers. He was from Ireland, told a lot of funny jokes, entertained us, told us about this club that did fun and exciting things such as ski trips and retreats. So many of our fellow students, we signed up for ECYD, and we thought it was great.
We all thought that they were just young and positive, and they talked about a ski trip and fun, and that's what we wanted. But I remember when we sat down, it was my first time looking through like a Bible, like, oh my gosh, where do you find the Gospels? That kind of thing, and I really felt out of my norm, out of my comfort zone.
We were lucky because we'd have the priests come over and help us on each encounter, and they really opened up the Gospels to us and really explained to us, about Jesus, really, and it was like meeting Jesus for the first time, and it really encouraged us.
But the first time was the Feast of Christ the King, actually, and for me it was a poignant event, just in the sense that it was a few weeks after my father had passed away when I was 12, and I went to this activity, and we had an international feast, and I just remember being so impressed, like all the different food and how much fun it was, really, and how international this organization was. And then my second important moment was about 6 months later when we went on our incorporation retreat. None of us really knew what incorporation was, but we knew that we were going on this retreat up at St. Mary's in Barnesville, spending time in the chapel, and just remember having a beautiful gospel reflection in the chapel. And we had never really gotten to know Christ as personally, and those talks really helped us. And it was that year, in March of 1976, that we all incorporated into ECYD, pledging our friendship to Christ. And I remember that it was on that retreat, I was like 13 or 14, that I realized that Christ wanted to be my best friend. And I still remember that moment as a turning point in my life. For me, that was something that moved me to think, yeah, I made mistakes all different, throughout my life and everything like that. But yet I always had that friendship with Christ. And to this day, I still have that friendship with Christ. And that's been kind of a stronghold.
I think that what always draws me back and what always keeps me going is that ECYD taught me how to love Jesus as a friend. I can't live each day without my friend alongside me, my friend helping me carry my cross, my friend listening to me, being with me, and no one ever spoke to me about prayer like that except ECYD.
It was the first women's convention ever, I think. And the women from Detroit were coming to Washington and for a weekend, for a retreat. So they had to be picked up. So Mary and I borrowed the boys' center van, which probably wasn't kosher. And we drove down to Washington, and we're wondering on the way down there, I said, Mary, I said, what are these women going to be like? We thought from Bloomfield Hills in Michigan, oh boy, they're going to be, really la-di-da. And of course, it was nonstop talking all the way back to the Girls Center. We had a luncheon for them there, and then left there and came over to Villa Cortona. And afterwards, I said, Mary and I, we just looked at each other, we said, they're just like us. So from there on in, we hit it off. You just felt then as part of a larger family.
Pat Warner was like this little idol that we had of her because she was just so kind and beautiful, and she talked about praying and how she spoke with Jesus and how he spoke to her.
We had our meetings in her rec room at her house for a whole year, and she would always make it fun and exciting. We always did gospel reflections. We always had a great snack too, I do remember that. And but we did arts and craft activities, we did apostolic activities, we were thinking about other people, and she was always helping us think about other people and to go out of ourselves, but always forming us and being that mom to help us grow in Christ.
Mary Sears was also just really kind and fun.
Recently my mother passed away, and it was just so beautiful to see Mrs. Sears and Mrs. Warner at my mother's funeral. It was like we were a family. Really, ECYD formed my apostolic heart. The book apostolate. We had a little center on Adrian Street, and it was right down the street from St. Jude's School, our elementary school. And we would go there after school or on the weekends, and the ladies had this international book apostolate, and they would collect books from all different places in the United States and send them to the missions in Africa.
I can remember vividly going to Washington in the 16th of December 1983. Father Declan Murphy was still there, but after a few days he left the house, left the Legion, and joined the diocesan priests. So he left me with a huge task, and I tried to follow with groups like Pat Warner, Mary Sears, John Wicks, Cecilia Mayer, I think it was Rowedder, and good groups also like Mrs. Connors, Mary Scott, groups like David Warner, and others. They really were the backbone of the Legion of Christ in Washington.
I've never fainted in my life, but that was about the closest I ever came. I was shocked because I did a lot of work for him. As I say, I was his secretary.
And I looked at Pat, and I went to my car, and so when I got home I called her and I said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? They are the best, And she said, I don't know. I said, I want to talk to Father Patrick. She said, I do too. So we called him, and we both went over to meet him. And Father sat in his living room talking to us, and then another priest appeared. It was Father Anthony Bannon. He introduced him to us, and then he just stayed in the corner, just kind of observing. And we told Father Patrick there were at least, 6 other women and lots of youth that wanted to continue with the Legionaries of Christ. And he said, okay, let's have a meeting.
We did go through a lot of trying times.
I learned the gospel says, love your enemies and do good to those that mistreat you.
Father Patrick, God bless him, he was there for 7 years and he helped build us up again. He brought that family spirit, he brought that joy, that laughter, and like, let's do our best and let's build this back up.
I was ordained in December 1982 and went to Washington in 83. So I really was a very young priest starting off in Washington. And thankfully I had all these good people who looked out for me, who helped me, and who were very enthusiastic about the Legionary mission.
And I feel like I just start things. And it's funny because I never thought of myself as a leader. At the same time, I see that the movement has formed leadership qualities in me.
I remember Father Patrick just laughing so hard telling us about one of the ladies' retreats. So the ladies, one time when he started to pray, he was facing the cross or Jesus praying, and they were all praying, and when he turned around they had all bought wax lips and they put them in their mouth.
In 1997, I think, I bought the house on Norton Road. Mr. Carrigan, William Carrigan, who lived in Kensington, Bethesda, gave me the $90,000 down payment that I needed.
Love for the Pope and love for that mission has always impelled me really to go further.
And I think he tries to discourage the Legionaries of Christ through opposition. So when everything's going wrong and you know you're doing what's right, just keep on persevering. God will give you the grace.
Also, RC is my family. You know, it's just, I mean, ever since the fact that I met Regnum Christi right after my father died, I just always felt like that was God's way of saying, I will take care of you. Here is your father figure. Here are the people who are going to be your family.
So we went to become teenagers, and we didn't go through that rough adolescence. We didn't have fights with each other. We were more or less talking about our crosses and things that were, how Jesus could help us and how he was going to give us all this strength and how he was the positive element in our life.
He really brought it home to me that Christ could be my own personal friend. And I just had never experienced that before.
And so it was through ECYD and through exposure to the Legion that, one, we cracked open the gospel and we read it and we realized that Christ was a live person. He was important to us, and he was there to be our best friend.
We were all young, we were all enthusiastic, and we were all capable of doing a lot of things that I'm not sure I could do today. But I have very fond memories of Washington, D.C. It was great being there, great remembering you also. Thanks very much. God bless you all.